Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in today. This is the 5th edition of MaMa's Live Talks. This is a series where we bring on artists and activists to discuss how they're responding to the quarantine and the coronavirus pandemic in New York City. We're so excited to have a really great lineup of people who are they are artists and activists who are getting involved in their own communities and doing really great work. We have Sarah Mathews and Derek Smith, who are both, Sarah is a founder of Bed-Stuy Strong, and Derek is here talking to us about Bed-Stuy Strong. We have Adela Wagner, who works with Crown Heights Mutual Aid and is one of the leaders there. And we also have Nadia Pinder, who is working on doing a rent strike in her own building, runs a small business called StuyDYED, and also has worked with Bed-Stuy Strong. We're so excited to have all of them here today, and they're going to be discussing a lot of different things, including the work that they're doing, the things that they've seen, the things that they've learned. So we'd like to go ahead and get started. Please, everyone, we'd like to acknowledge our funders at MaMa that make this possible and allow us to bring these people on to have these important discussions. And we'd also like to acknowledge that we are doing this discussion in the context of a lot of people who are going through a really hard time. And we'd like to acknowledge that as we go forward. And we feel very privileged to be able to have this conversation for you all. Please, if you are able to give to help MaMa continue doing this programming, you can text to donate from your phone. You can text to donate by texting MaMa Live, all one word, no spaces, to 44321. That's MaMa Live to 44321, and we appreciate all of our donors. Also, if you have anything to say or any questions for any of our panelists, please go ahead and send that to the comments in the Facebook Live, and we will be very excited to ask those questions to our panelists. All right. So the first question that we want to start talking about to all of you is just if you want to say hello, turn on your cameras, turn on your microphones, and you can start saying, what is the work that you do? Maybe talk a little bit about your organization and say, what have you seen there's been a need for in your communities during this quarantine? Maybe we can start with Bed-Stuy Strong, Sarah and Derek.
Sure. Hi, can everyone hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It's so nice to be with all of y'all. So I'm Sarah Mathews, and I founded Bed-Stuy Strong, which is a neighborhood-based mutual aid organization, or mutual aid network, I should say, and online community of 3,000 members so far. And what we do is, when it comes to our mutual aid operation, is try to make sure that no neighbor goes hungry. It's really about as simple as that. So we pool donations from our community and use them to buy a week or more groceries for neighbors in need. And as of, I think, yesterday or 2 days ago, we managed to do that for over 3,000 neighbors, providing an estimated, I think, something over like 60,000 meals, which is wonderful. We've been around since the middle of March, so about 6 weeks now. And in the before times / in my capacity outside of organizing, I am a writer. Derek, over to you.
Hello, my name is Derek Smith. I'll start with the before times. I am a performer and producer of independent theater, usually like in the Brooklyn and downtown scenes. I also have worked as like a showrunner and writer for like live interactive media, and kind of done a lot in my time, a lot of different things in New York. And so about a month and a half ago, I saw a flyer in my neighborhood looking for volunteers for something called Bed-Stuy Strong, and I joined, and I began focusing my work on helping them kind of develop as a supportive force, how we got groceries to neighbors in need. And now my work there is mostly training and mobilizing volunteers to do both the intake side and the delivery side. So all of our points of connection with our neighbors who are contacting us.
Cool, incredible. Maybe Adela, you can talk a little bit about Crown Heights Mutual Aid.
Yeah, hi. Hi, everyone. My name is Adela Wagner. Before this all happened, I was an active visual artist. I do social justice related interactive pieces and immersive artwork. And then middle March, similar to Sarah, I saw this crisis fall upon us, and I just thought, there are only two possible ways how this can end, and one is where we all kind of turn our backs towards one another or from one another and isolate ourselves as countries and communities and people, and fill our hearts with fear, or we take this as a wake-up call, and we take this as a challenge that bonds us together. And so a couple of neighbors and me have founded Crown Heights Mutual Aid, which is working similarly as Bed-Stuy Strong. And we deliver groceries to neighbors. We respond to calls for assistance, like financial aid, resources and information. We are developing street food pantries, like big commercial fridges that are on the streets for everyone to take food from. And and compiling resources and just creating a virtual and physical platform that people can connect and create relationships, and receive and ask for both receive and give help to one another.
Amazing. Thank you for speaking on that. And also I'd like to go over to Nadia, who I know you've been doing also many things during the time of quarantine, especially in regards to housing. Can you talk a little bit about that and your role?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're good. Now we can hear you. Go ahead.
Just off-brand headphones from Apple. That's all that is. My name is Nadia Pinder. I have a tie-dyeing business, a small business. It's mostly based in gigs in New York City, and obviously gigs, specifically ones where people gather and touch things, aren't happening anymore. And I found myself unemployed. I know that all my future gigs are gone, and I realized very quickly that I would have zero way to pay my rent. But because I have a past experience of working in housing, specifically at a citywide housing nonprofit that had a tenant help hotline, so I was kind of working in a capacity constantly talking to people in the housing crisis before a global pandemic. I found myself completely certain of what the next steps were. I knew that I would be not paying rent and trying to create a unified front in my building. And slowly but surely, I ended up advising friends on what they could do. And I developed a resource document providing tips for how to organize in your building, sample letters to give to your landlord for announcing that you're doing a rent strike, post that on the internet, post that in Bed-Stuy Strong, because I also occasionally do some deliveries with them as well. And just, I found myself leading a cause within my friends and heading up a rent strike in my own building as well.
That's incredible. And I know you were talking about how there are a lot of housing organizations offering services to New Yorkers right now, but can you say a little bit about why you chose to do like your own personalized rent strike and why that's important?
Yes, right before April 1st, a bill was proposed in our state legislature to cancel the rent. And there's been lots of petitions passed around. There is a coalition formed called Housing Justice for All that is kind of a big coalition of all the housing networks and organizations in New York City banding together, and they formed something that has now developed into something more helpful, but in its beginning stages seemed to be more focused on the like social media outreach. But there weren't any toolkits, there weren't any sample letters to landlords. There was a lot of like, well, sign the petition to make sure that this bill gets passed. But on April 1st, there was no information. There was no, if you need to cancel your rent and you haven't talked to your neighbors before the first of the month, then it's not going to happen. And I want to say on the 26th of March, I saw that there was a gap, so I decided to write up a document myself because I'd already written shorter forms of it and texted it to friends or told it to friends. Since then, they've released a toolkit, which is very helpful. Just Fix NYC has released a national website called norent.org that advises people on the national level based on your state and the protections in your state for what you can do. But I decided to write something because I knew that my friends who don't know about housing organizations and who don't know how housing court works or how someone gets evicted if they're going to get evicted, my friends didn't know that. They didn't know to look out for housing organizations to seek help from, so I decided to write something myself.
Incredible. I know the work that you're all doing, I find it to be like absolutely amazing. And my apartment's in Crown Heights. And so I heard about this sort of through neighbors and people. And I know that, Crown Heights, Bed-Stuy, Bushwick, Flatbush, these are neighborhoods that are being definitely changed in a dramatic way by the pandemic and the quarantine. And so I know you all are artists, and a big thing we've been discussing is how artists are not just artists on this sort of live talks. They are, immigrants, they are servers, they are, sex workers, they are gig workers, they are tradespeople, and all the skill, like the nature of the community sort of requires everyone who's an artist in New York City to be that, to have those skills. Can you talk about how the skills that you have from being an artist have come in handy during all of the work that you're doing for these organizations and planning them and building them and the communication? Anyone's can go.
I think something just to touch on a little bit about what you said, like just being scrappy and being resourceful, and being okay with leaning on others and sometimes even strangers that you've only had a few interactions with online. It was like 3 weeks until I met anyone from Bed-Stuy Strong in person who I had been working with like for hours on end, a day, especially in the first month. And I also think, artists have a tendency towards imagination, and I think that quality allows us to try to hope for or imagine a better world or a better community than what we see existing, especially in our media outlets and how our world is reflected back to us, when actually many of the people around us want the best for each other as well.
Anyone else want to comment on that?
I was gonna say exactly the same thing, Derek. It's exactly as you said. Like, to imagine the impossible and to engage your creativity in a way that is not straightforward is definitely one. And then I think human connections. Like in my artwork, I'm trying to create spaces where people feel things differently, where people engage with issues in a different way on like a more personal level, and create these connections between an issue and several humans or different experiences. And I bet other people in like their own artistic disciplines are the same. It's creating these connections and relationships between people, which is so important these days too. And it's crazy that even as Derek mentioned, with social distancing and with Zoom calls without end, we are able to make new friends so quickly. I've never met so many people and made so many quick friends in such a short period of time.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I know earlier we talked about how all of us are sort of transplants in Brooklyn. You know, we're not necessarily from Brooklyn. Has working in your communities in this capacity changed the way that you look at where you live, or like meeting your neighbors? Has it given you new insight?
I was actually going to, before I answer that, I was trying to thread the needle of a thought about sort of our capacities as artists. I really echo what Derek and Adela have said so far, and I also think it's complicated, right? So you know, I'm an immigrant. I did not grow up in this neighborhood. I have had experiences in my life that have made me both want to tell stories and want to be useful. You know, I think that, and something I try to be aware of at most times in my own practice as an artist and a writer, are the ways in which the art world, especially in a place like New York, can serve to critique power, but can also absolutely serve to wash the feet of those in power, you know? And I think that it's this really complicated time that we're living in, where if you're an artist, I write literary fiction, right? Which is to say that there are market realities, the people who, the majority of people who read the books that, you know, I hope to write are are people with some degree of privilege, and it's definitely possible for artists to transcend that and break through and, you know, be I don't know, Sally Rooney or a Jacqueline Woodson or someone who really the books that are being held on people's commutes. But I think that there's often, in the last 40 years or so, there's been this bridge built between art and capital that I think about a lot in my own work. So yeah, I think that all these pieces intersect, you know. But on the flip side, I think about just what it means to imagine something new, which happens every time that I successfully open up Microsoft Word and start going, and it ends up being something good, which is not that often. But it also, I think, that same generative impulse lay behind, you know, on March 11th or March 12th, I can't remember which, I wrote a Google document that was how to start a neighborhood hub for how to organize your neighborhood for COVID-19 on Slack. And I think that at least 15 Bed-Stuy Strong-esque hubs have been created using that framework, and eventually the tools that people who joined the early version of Bed-Stuy Strong came up with, you know, I definitely can't take credit for what it's become. But I think the power of imagination in shaping a new space is something that definitely shouldn't be discounted. And at the same time, I think it's really important that we think about who we are as whole people, both in terms of our journeys to get to this point, but also the power we wield in the world, you know.
Incredible. Anybody else want to sort of comment on either of those things, anything that Sarah just said, or about what you've learned from working in the community?
Yeah, I think something that's very interesting about being a working artist in whatever capacity that is, because you could be paying for your life and expenses with your art, or you could very well not be. And all of those people are also artists, but knowing that at the start of this, I wouldn't have known because we're all staying inside. I wouldn't have seen the flyers or met someone who was already participating in Bed-Stuy Strong if I hadn't gone out the day before non-essential business closed to support the local record store, because I knew that man was an artist, and I knew that he would be suffering. And not because I am such a benevolent and privileged person, because I am also suffering. And because we as artists are, if you are able to put your entire self into your art, you are lucky to be able to put yourself in these times. So you've got another side hustle. So knowing that like the communities that I'm in, and I'm also a comedian as well. I know so many whose gigs are gone, all they have, and who would just take on themselves before the crisis to say, I can support myself with my art, and to see that entirely wiped out, and to know that they didn't have another resource, and that we are each other's resources. And I've already seen such an outpouring of empathy within the community of artists, of people who are in a good position, who have a job that allows them to stay fed and housed, but they are donating to people who can't afford their studio spaces, and whose side hustles have all stopped and their art hustles have stopped. But because we are constantly involved with people who are not just living paycheck to paycheck, but living like project to project, like living like art to art and hustle to hustle. I feel like across the board, I would say it's like maybe like 20-80 of like people who are fine and people who are like, well, that's my future. So I would say I'm on the end of seeing people who are like, I really don't know what tomorrow is. And knowing that as artists, as we've already said, like that we have the imagination, and the idea that we are not alone, and that we work best in collaboration and in community with others. That is always at the core of art. Even if my art is alone, even if I am a solo artist, I know that like my art doesn't exist outside of a community. So I always have to check in with my community. And that was like, when something goes wrong, I think, what's going on with my community? My community will have the answers, because in every other instance of struggle, they are the people I turn to. So why would that not be this was my immediate impulse for this, was like, well, I must turn to my community, because I know that they are hurting.
Yeah, thank you, Nadia. I wanted to jump in real quick and remind anyone who's viewing on Facebook Live that you can comment to ask any questions. We would be happy to ask. These panelists are doing an amazing job of talking about the work that they do. And if it inspires you to ask anything, we'd love to hear it. I also wanted to say, from what you were saying, Nadia, to going forward talking more, you said how before this, people were already living sort of precariously, food insecurity, housing insecurity, two things not at all unique to, the pandemic, right? All of you sort of worked in these fields a little bit before and volunteered. A big question that we've asked on this live talk is, how does this make us reflect on the way that artists lived in New York before the quarantine? And since your services have been so helpful to so many people, what are you thinking about in the future when maybe things open back up, but these issues maybe still exist, even if they exist in a different way? And anyone can sort of jump in.
That's a really hard question. I was thinking about how throughout this experience and this crisis, I've seen these crazy problems just like emerge from the ground or from the water, but they've always been here. It's just that COVID-19 has exacerbated and really worked as a catalyst to highlight these structural problems that have always been here. And I think going after COVID, there is not going to be going back to anything that I don't believe that there's going to be going back into anything that that was existing or that we knew from before. I think it has to change, and I'm kind of hoping that we can phoenix our way out of it, where we really critically look into the situation that was before and the problems that we've had and ignored and had the privilege and luxury to turn our blind eye on. And now that we really actually see it and feel it, just decide to address it, and then we can turn into a better bird because of this struggle and because of this crisis. Did you get the phoenix? So I think the first people and the first kind of facilities and people and institutions that I was thinking about in that mid-March was homeless shelters. I was thinking, oh my goodness, what is going to happen when we go shelter in place for the people who have no shelter? What is going to happen? And this is, and New York City is overwhelmed with people who have no home to go to and living on the street, and the resources for them are not grand. And so it's always that this problem has always existed, and now it's really painful. And being in regular contact with these shelters and with the workers who are tirelessly working there, I've seen the impact of COVID-19 on these people and the residents, and it's striking. But so these questions, I think it's really important to just like hold the questions and not go back and turn our blind eye again. Just really acknowledge it and acknowledge that New York City does not have the infrastructure to hold as many people. The subway needs to be cleaned more than once a week. Like let's think about all of these different things that we haven't yet before. It's a good question.
Yeah, I echo some of that for sure. I think that something I've been thinking a lot about is so the Indian writer and activist Arundhati Roy, who is from my hometown in India, and always, like, since I was a child, like someone I looked up to deeply, wrote this essay recently where she said, the pandemic is a portal. It is a portal to another world, and the nature of that world is sort of something to be collectively constructed and collectively owned, which is like both a beautiful sentiment, I think, and like a frankly terrifying one. I think you can read that, and at first glance it sounds like it's like like hope. We can make a better world. A better world's on our way, but in actuality, like it's much more likely that we make a much worse world unless we sort of fight all the way for it. Just because of all the power structures that currently exist right now, the rails are not set for the train to move into like better world, right? All these like horrible mixed metaphors. Forgive me. So yeah, I think I just wanted to like comment on that. And yeah, I think that's part of our place as artists to like articulate these things in ways that like register with people, people in our communities, people in the world. I think that I really feel everything that Nadia has been saying about like the precarity of the artist's life. I think something that I have been thinking about a lot in the last 4 years in particular, which has sort of been the period of time I decided to like devote myself to writing as like something other than a hobby, is just what does it mean to like make a living? Like what does it mean to like, I don't have a trust fund, I don't have, like I have to pay my own way in this world. And so what does it mean to make art and to do writing, which is this like notoriously precarious, way of life, unless you come from like a certain kind of background. And the final thought is, I don't know if people will walk away with this, like, walk away from this time thinking of it this way, but I really hope that they, like, I think the degree to which people have been confined at home, dependent on art, is really striking to me. Like one of my friends like started crying because there was a problem with their internet, and and it was going to be fixed in 2 hours, but it meant that she couldn't watch this prestige TV show that she was really excited to like watch like the penultimate episode of. And like, that's legit, you know? I mean, it's like, she was like, I just have this, you know, this is all I have. And I was just like, so many people's work and artistry went into creating that experience for people to enjoy and be informed by and be moved by. Yeah, and I hope that that's valued, you know, in monetary ways as well.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. That has been a huge question that I think we've talked about in the live talks of, you know, how are artists being valued, how are art makers being valued, and also artists, I think, a little bit having like a crisis of the faith of like, what am I making, and like, how am I participating, what am I saying, you know? I wanted to say we are at like the 30-minute mark, and I love this conversation, everything that everyone's been saying. Sort of for the last 10 or 15 minutes or so, if everyone sort of wanted to, I find it very fascinating to hear you all talk about the things that are working to sort of help the residents of these communities, yourselves included, like the communal food, the food deliveries, like what have you learned that you never would have thought of before? You all said that since it is so community-based, everyone's been coming together and contributing ideas. Like what has been working? What are you most proud of? And sort of how can people get involved? If all of you want to sort of comment on that.
Derek, do you want to start for Bed-Stuy Strong?
Sure. So if you want to get involved, you should go to our website and you should join our Slack, see what's going on. We do volunteer trainings that are also mixed in with kind of like welcome sessions that show you not only how to like navigate our network, but also how to use Slack in general so that you can like find everything that's going on there. I will say that I think we have a lot to be proud of at Bed-Stuy Strong in terms of what we have been able to do. I think that Sarah would agree with me when I say that it's always a kind of a balance dance in terms of figuring out what the next week will look like, because our systems and the way that we work evolves constantly, which is only, you know, to give credit to so many of the folks that make that possible. I'm not sure if this is what you wanted to hear. I know that like I can talk about the successes of Bed-Stuy Strong, and I'll let Sarah touch on that as well. But something that has been very surprising to me in my experience of doing the work that I'm doing with Bed-Stuy Strong is hearing the testimonies and like straight from our neighbors that are in need. And being on some of these calls with folks who are looking for access to food and access to supplies and kind of the bare minimum that you need to survive. I think I would just stress that there are many, many people in need, and we have a backup, a very significant backup of calls that we are struggling to get through. And I would just put it out there that I don't think that narrative is always getting through within, again, like our mainstream media and the news coverage. It is like very brutal out there, and a lot of people are struggling, and most of them are people that live below the poverty line. And those are the folks who have a lot to say about people that they've lost in their lives, whether it's family members, community members, or anything like that.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, a couple of quick things. You know, first of all, I just want to be very clear about how, you know, I think Derek and I and other Bed-Stuy Strong organizers see our identity. We see ourselves as like a relative newcomer to the like decades of mutual aid organizing happening in formal and informal capacities in central Brooklyn that have happened historically. You know, people have been doing like the neighbors helping neighbors piece, you know, in organized ways. Like people have been doing that for time immemorial. And, you know, just like want to acknowledge as a non-Black person that this is like a historically Black neighborhood where, you know, Black folks have been doing mutual aid like since the start of this country because they had to. So just want to like own that and put that out there. I think of Bed-Stuy Strong as a gap filler and like sort of this rapid response galvanized online organizing that had that happened in part because we're seeing an unprecedented global crisis where people are locked down and unable to leave their houses and unable to organize in traditional ways. And so it makes sense to have this online community. So that's just like one contextual piece that I'll say. I think that the work that moves me the most right now in general is mutual aid work that's happening in all kinds of ways across the country, across the city. And I also find the organizing around things like rent, like moving and incredibly important. And I think it's like all part of this giant quilt of effort that is going to like all together save people's lives, right? And the tragedy, like the heartbreaking tragedy is like, we can do everything we can do. Like I can empty my bank account, half the Bed-Stuy Strong members could empty their bank accounts, and like a lot of people will go hungry still, and a lot of people will still die. And that speaks to like the enormous failures at the level of our federal and state governments. So that's my Debbie Downer take. And then the other piece that I will say is I think a lot of people are like hungry with their whole hearts for a way to feel like they're doing anything that feels direct, because this is overwhelming. It's like being, like you're sitting at home during like a really boring world war is what it feels like a lot of the time. And yeah, so I think that if you live in or near Bed-Stuy and you want to volunteer, go to bedstuystrong.com and find a way to plug in. If you are a person who has money to spare and you want that money to within 4 days end up in someone's fridge who would go hungry without it, please Venmo bedstuystrong.com or go to the website bedstuystrong.com. There are ways to donate on there. And I really think all this should be proximal, So if you live in Crown Heights, don't give to bedstuystrong.com, give to Crown Heights Mutual Aid. Like I think that the money should stay within neighborhoods when possible, if there's resources for it to go to.
I love that. If Adela and Nadia, you have anything to say about your organizations, we'd love to hear it. This was great.
I resonate with everything that Sarah just said. We are coming as practical babies. They're organizers and community organizations that have been doing an incredible job for years and years, including facilities like homeless shelters, the senior centers, and the medical professionals that have been working. So we're newcomers, and we just we're coming to support whatever is being done and fill the holes that are missing. In the beginning of this, in the middle of the March, when we were organizing and beginning to organize, we asked ourselves two questions that kind of stick with me. One is, what is the need in the community? Looking ahead the week, the 2 weeks, whatever it is. And then what are the resources that we already have? And I think it's really important because, as Sarah said, this is an incredible, unprecedented, overwhelming time. And if we look at the crisis and the whole situation in the pandemic, I get overwhelmed. There's nothing, I can't solve it. I can't help everybody. It's the virus is spreading. It's spreading across the borders. Like we can't solve this situation. And so it's really easy to get overwhelmed and kind of deflated and being like, I can't help, I can't do anything. But it's not true. There's you already have resources, whether you acknowledge it right now or not. Maybe you don't have income right now, and so you need somebody to send you food. But what you have is time, and what you have is maybe you are a magician with Google Excel sheets, and every spreadsheet that you do is like, this kingdom, please reach out. Like that's an incredible skill, right? Maybe you're a graphic designer. Maybe you have a commercial fridge that you can donate. Maybe you have a front yard that you can house the fridge for people to come in and take the food when they need to. There are things that that you have as resources that you can share with others, and they can be small in your perspective, but they are big in somebody else's. So there are ways how you can help. And yeah, so definitely reach out Crown Heights on Facebook or Slack. And just check in with yourself. What are your talents? What are your resources? Because you have them. And everyone has, I kind of want to acknowledge that everyone has needs, as Sarah and Nadia was saying, was talking about artists and struggling artists. Like we all have needs, and it's okay. and we all have things that we can share with others as resources.
Oh man, just vibes all around. I definitely think that's something I've seen as a difficult thing to overcome for folks who want to get involved but don't know how, is thinking that this fight, whatever this fight is, if it's a rent strike, if it's getting involved in like a mutual aid network, is that this fight isn't for them. That like this fight is for, like, I'm not poor, so I don't need to do this, or like I'm fine, my friends are fine, I don't need to do this, or like I can pay my rent, so I guess I should just do it. And realizing that like people power is, and that's like a thing you hear in organizing all the time, but like that there is strength in numbers, that it's not about you, it's about us, and that you are not island, you live in a community, you live in a neighborhood, and even though you can't see everyone is there and is present, and it's not all about the people that directly affect you. It's that there's someone out there who is like alone in some way, and you could lend your presence to them. You could lend your presence to their fight. Also, the idea that you as a tenant have no power is god awful. You have so much power, and we've been told this psychotic narrative that like the landlord has all the power and you are just like the meek peasant, just like collecting crumbs from those who have. And you have much power, you have so much influence. And I know that even the fact that like I'm not in a position and empty a savings account into like a mutual aid, even though I cannot do that, I know that like I have a bicycle and I can go to the grocery store and I can wear my mask and I can deliver something and I can smile when I do it, and that there's someone who genuinely needed that and I could provide that, and that that's something within me that I can give. That you have so much power, you have so much influence, and you just, everyone is like much more safe than they think they are in terms of like power in their communities. Like you and your neighbors have much more influence over your landlord as a group than you do by yourself. Also that it's we have a lot to learn about the communities that we serve, and meaning we also have a lot to learn about ourselves, that we are not apart from those communities, but like I have so much resilience to learn from those who are hit the hardest. I have so much scrappiness, as Derek called earlier, to learn from the people that I deliver groceries to, because they have been scrappy for years. I talked to my mom about my rent strike, and she was like, you know, she laughed because like I don't come from a lot of money. I've seen an eviction notice before. I know what to do when the water gets cut off, and how to make sure that I can like brush my teeth and like light a candle, so I can, you know, and that's part of my childhood. That's not a part of everyone's childhood. But my mom was like, yeah, well, they can't take what you don't have. Like, what are you gonna, like, someone can't take, and that's something that's in my wheelhouse. And to say that, and to have people be like, what? I've never heard that. And to be like, take care of yourself. Like, they can't take what you don't have. Like, someone's not gonna, like, if I don't have the money, you're not getting it for rent, and I gotta take care of myself. Am I gonna negotiate with the cashier at Stop and Shop? No, I'm gonna make sure my family is fed. I'm gonna make sure my people are taken care of. You can't take what I don't have. And also, my mom loves to say this. There's a family saying that goes, "Ain't thrown away." Like, you have not been thrown away. Like, you are not. No one cast you out. There are so many people, whether that's your family, your roommates, your neighbors. Like, you weren't cast by this crisis. Like, you have people who value you and who want you well. You weren't thrown away. You have so much that like keeps you in your community, and you should want to make someone feel that way as well. You should want to remind someone, well, I'm not thrown away. You're not thrown away. I have value. You have value. And what are the skills that I innately possess to let you see that we both have value and that we'll get through it together.
I think that is a gorgeous ending point for this discussion. And I have to say, I'm just so proud. I've always felt proud to be a part of the arts communities in New York City, but this makes me so especially proud even now. Thank you all for tuning in, everyone who's been watching, and thank you to our panelists, Adela, Sarah, Nadia, Derek. It has been such a pleasure, and I really mean it to speak to all of you today. And thank you so much for everything that you've been doing and everyone who's been working in your organizations. And I can't wait to see you all once once everything opens up again. Thank you so much, and thank you for tuning in. Thank you to the funders who allow this to be possible. And we'll put all the information on LaMama's website for anyone who wants to get involved.
Thank you. Thank you for all this and for organizing, and to all the viewers tuning in.
Great. All right, I think we're good, right, Chris?